All right, episode 115 of Pursuit of Balance. Welcome. Today, I got a lot of random stuff for you guys. I actually wrote down a bunch of things throughout the week. They're just like kind of little reflection items throughout the week that I've been thinking about. And I had 3 days this week actually with no caffeine, and it gave me a lot of time to really reflect on what was important. And I'm going to tell you right now, removing caffeine was definitely not one of those. I almost had to file for divorce on Tuesday. I mean, Jesus Christ. I was so irritable from not having caffeine. But I'm going to kind of read out the notes that I have, and then we're just going to kind of see where this thing naturally segues to. So, number one thing, which I definitely think I'm going to talk about the most today, is like the importance of having deep relationships and the quality of those relationships. And the most important piece behind it is the fact that we should be nurturing and how to nurture them, right? I had also keeping up with the Joneses. This is a conversation I came up with family. Liking your job is the biggest life hack. What's worth sacrificing for and how much is too much. And then I was sitting last night kind of thinking about like, okay, which one do I really want to talk about? And I think I kind of want to talk about all of them. But we're going to start with the deep relationships, right? And this thought came from, since the pandemic, I started golfing. I've fallen in love with golf. I really, really just enjoy golf. I think it's something for me that allows me to be outside. I'm now walking because I got myself a little fancy electric caddy. I get to be with friends or family. I get to be competitive. I get to do something semi-athletic that requires some skill and some coordination, which I always, get joy out of. Just doing anything that's a new skill to learn. But the coolest thing that honestly has come from golf, which has nothing, well, I guess it does. It has something to do with golf. Is I've had a lot more time to be able to spend with my family, right? I've got time to be able to spend with my dad and my mom together. They golf together. My mom's super athletic. My dad's been golfing for a very long time and then took a very long break when he had neck surgery. But then when the pandemic came around and I started golfing, my dad kind of got back into it. My mom, just obviously riding along, was kind of a cart girl in the beginning, but naturally she started picking things up and swinging a club here and there, and now she's almost beating me. But the cool thing about it is, like, especially as I've gotten older, when I was younger, when I got out of high school, I had one of my best friends at the time commit suicide. I had my uncle pass from, like, a kidney problem, and I had a grandpa pass when I was really, really young, so I don't really want to kind of bring that to the story. But at a very young age, I feel like I came to, like, this crossroad in life, or this thought of, like, the importance of just, like, having fun and really cherishing the relationships that I have and not, taking for granted the time that I have with people, right? And it sometimes can sound like a very dark thought, right? But I think about this for both me individually. I think about this for my relationships, my significant other. It's very easy in life and jobs too, like everything, right? It's very easy for us to just like take things for granted, right? Just expecting that I'm going to have this job tomorrow. This relationship's always going to be here. There's always tomorrow. And I think it's a trap for so many of us for so many things, because when we just bank on tomorrow, it creates this kind of natural mindset around procrastination and lack of taking action right away. But really from a gratitude perspective, I've grown and I've gotten older, and now I'm 33. I think I've like had the best part of the relationship that I've had so far in my 33 years of life with my parents, right? I don't say that in a sob way, like I've ever had a bad relationship. I've never had a bad relationship with my parents, right? But I just feel like I have this like cool connection with my parents right now, where I'm like excited to go play golf with them. I'm excited to go have drinks with them after. But most importantly, it's just like when I'm with them, I think the time that I have with them, the presence that I should be providing or be in when I'm with them is more like relevant for some reason around my parents, right? And I even think about that with like Nikki's side, my fiance, like not so much her parents, but I think like her grandparents, right? Like Nanu's like in his 90s, Nana's like late 80s, and super impressive. I mean, this guy's still playing golf in his like early to mid 90s. I mean, like definitely goals in life for sure. But when you come to that age, it's a very natural thought for most people to think about, like, okay, well, when is the last time? So like taking the opportunity to not just say no and flake. When I was in my early 20s, and this is for a handful of other reasons, not just excuses, but like there's plenty of bad reasons I probably don't need to talk about in today's episode of why I was missing holidays and I was just kind of taking for granted, like, I don't really want to go to this party, or I don't really want to do this family event thing. And as I've gotten older, I kind of gotten over that. Like I try to make it something that like no matter what, I always say yes, right? I try to say yes to like seeing people or seeing family or seeing elders or whatever it is. And I don't want that to be a thing like where I think we should just be saying yes only to old people and not saying no to your friends because they're young. Like, I think we should just get in the habit of trying to do this as much as possible, and then start to refine down on like who's really important to you. And this kind of comes back to this just original point behind it all, is the importance of deep relationships, right? The first line of relationship that every single human has when you're born, right, is you have your parents, right? Some of us have our bloodline parents that you get to see, or some of us maybe even are adopted, but we all have some level of parents, right? Hopefully. So I think that's the first natural line of relationship that we create in life, right? It's like this development between a son or a daughter towards their mom and dad. And just to my point earlier, I think you go through a lot of life and you kind of maybe take things for granted, or there's a phase where you're like, don't even want to see your parents, or you're too cool for them. I always think about that with the teenager years. But then your second thing that you develop in life is your friendships, right? And like that level of relationship and family, right? And I've always said, for me, it's like family kind of comes in three tiers. I have bloodline, I have friends, and I have coworkers. All of them for me are a series of family to me, right? Like for me, my team here at work is my family. My friends are my family. My obviously bloodline, parents, brothers, family, cousins, things like that. So I don't look at them really anything different. I try to treat them all the same way. That like, how would I want to, like, I wouldn't talk to my fiance or my mom or a coworker any different. I try to treat them with the same level of respect. Obviously there's some nuance to that. There's different things that we talk about, or different jokes or things, or maybe, so it is an element of talking differently. But as far as the respect goes, the attention and the time and the love and all those things that I try to show, like, I try to make that as parallel as possible, because I think it's important for me, because they are to me a level of family. But the importance of creating that deep relationship. So second thing that I think every child grows into is you create these relationships with friends, right? And this goes through school, this goes through sports, this goes through events outside of school. And then you get older, you graduate school, then you go to college, and if you're local, you get to see the same people maybe. If not, you move somewhere and you create these new relationships. And then the next phase is kind of going into work, and then the next phase is maybe starting a family, having kids. And there's this natural separation sometimes from these friends that you've had through school. And then you really, and I might be speaking from my own bias here, you kind of really dwindle down to like a couple, like really, really, really solid people, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, like, as far as the friend level of this stuff goes, you really, for me, I can count on one hand, like my homies, like my people that I could rely on whenever I needed to. And not to say that I don't have plenty of other great relationships around me, but like, I'm talking like your ride or dies, right? And then, you really try to do your best to keep those relationships alive, right? Because as we get older, we hear it so many times that you kind of lose these things because either work or family or both take over. The next level is your coworkers. As I've gotten older, I realized that some of my greatest friends and closest people in my life are actually the people I work with. And I think that just happens to be a recency thing, right? Like, and what I mean by that is I'm spending, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes working with these people side by side. It's very natural to obviously develop really, really solid relationships with these people. And personally, when I started the business, actually, that was one of my big goals as far as like culture goes, is like, culture was always really important to me, right? And as an employee, and as an athlete, I never really did great with authority, which is always one of the things that why doing my own thing always kind of intrigued me, because I feel like it gave me the opportunity to be able to kind of do my own thing and not be told what to do. But from the other side of it, what I wanted to have, I've had teams that I've played for where I had a great relationship with the coach and the teammates I was playing with. I've been in school where I've had classes that I liked, and sometimes it wasn't the class, it was the people. And I've had jobs, the same thing. And it just goes to show you that like the relationships and the culture and the environment that you spend time with really is the thing that allows you to have this deep sense of connection, right? And I think I made a post earlier this week talking about that in 2023 alone, there was over 300 million antidepressants prescribed, right? And that number for me just like is mind-boggling to think about. Like, I mean, how many people are in America? I think it's like 300 something million, right? So that's almost 85% of people taking an antidepressant. If by that, I mean, this is not what I'm saying behind it. Not 85% of people are on antidepressants, but if you think about the number. But then I think about like, well, how do we solve this mental health crisis that most people are dealing with, right? We've seen this huge shift since the pandemic. We've seen this shift since the technology eras. But like, what are the things that actually solve it? And it's actually like, well, it's coming back to the basics. Like, how many times does the doctor really ask you, how many steps a day you taking? What do your workouts look like? Are you overtraining or are you undertraining? How's your nutrition look? Are you buying your own food? What kind of whole food are you doing? Are you buying organic? Are you cooking your own food? Are you sleeping well? How does your sleep look? How does stress look? How do your relationships at home look? How's the environment you spend your day in look like? What's your mind? Like, all these factors around it, right? And for me, connection has always been a thing. Like, connection and purpose makes life super enjoyable, and it gives you motivation to get out of bed every morning. Like, having a sense of purpose, for me, it's my work. It's always been my work. I love what I do. I forever want to do this, and I want to surround myself by people that still want to be on the same mission that I do, of like helping other people be better. And most importantly, and this is like, even for anybody listening to this on the podcast right now, my biggest motivation for what I do, as far as this podcast go, the social media goes, my training individually, my training in classes, my business, my helping employees, whatever it is I like to see people better off, right? And I like people to break free from this societal norm of what we expect normal to be, because normal is fucked up. The minority is where we want to be, because the majority of people are heading the wrong direction. So how do we address physical health? How do we address mental health? How do we address the relationships? How do we create this perfect life where life is something you look forward to every single day that you're awake, right? And asleep, right? Enjoy your sleep too. And that, like, coming back to this, is like this connections part of it. Like, the deep relationships that you create in life are probably the most vital pieces to the sustainability of your health, right? And I'm thinking about this not just in mental health, but like a lot of aspects of it. But creating the deep relationship comes from understanding just how relationships work in general, right? Another kind of topic that I talked about earlier this week is, this new gym that we're building out in Palo Alto. We came to the agreement that they wanted to use their architect and contractor because we were building out 2 bathrooms and a utility closet. And the guy quoted like $240,000, which was just like astronomically just out of, like, I was like, holy shit, that is so overpriced. Like, I did our bathrooms for like $40,000 or $50,000. So granted, it's only one. This one's going to be 2 and one has 2 stalls. So I expected it to be a little bit more. I brought an architect in and I brought 3 different bids from the contractors in, and I basically got my lowest one around $70,000 to $80,000. But they still, after all this in the front end of signing the lease, they still wanted to stick with their guy. So I said, fair. I understand. It's your building. But understand, be fair to me. I'm not going to pay that, right? So they came to an agreement where I'm paying 20%. They're paying 80%, right? But long story short, the fact that this job's so expensive, I would just almost expect that I would not have to be on top of doing the communication and accountability and reach out and just bugging someone to do their job that they're being paid for. And the thing that I've learned, and it's not like I've learned this, the thing that I'm reminded of is the way I try to say it, is it does not matter if you're paying somebody or being paid by them, you always need to be on top of the accountability and the communication. So back to my previous point, what makes all relationships work really, really, really well is transparency and communication behind it, right? My fiance and I, in the beginning, probably year or 2 years of a relationship, I think we had a little bit different of experience if you ask us both. Like, I think it was harder for her than it was for me. And I think that's because I'm marrying an angel and she came with someone that had plenty of baggage and is hard to deal with already to begin with. So I'll give her that grace. But the most important thing is, like, we need to be transparent. We needed to communicate, right? And that is something I think, for me as a human, I struggle with even as a child, as my friends. Like, I was never really good at, like, me being the one that was proactively reaching out, me being the one to express my love. I was always good at, like, being reactive to those things, and not like in a bad way. Like, if anybody would hit me up, like, everyone knows me in my early 20s, I was always there. I was like, yeah, I'll be at the party, I'll be there. I was always on time. I never skipped school. I never missed sports. Like, I was always, like, for the most part, I would say there was a little period where I wasn't maybe going to all my family events like I mentioned earlier. But for the most part, I was always pretty reliable on him. But I never really did a lot of the stuff proactively on my end. I wasn't the one that was, reaching out to friends to ask how they're doing, right? Telling my parents that I love them, right? Or, like, reaching out to, significant other, right? All those things. And as I've gotten older, I was thinking about this when I originally wrote this down on my phone. Because I text, like, 2 buddies. And I text, like, my buddy that just moved to SoCal. It's like, hey, man, how's San Clemente? And I text my other buddy, Brandon, look forward to golf. And, like, those are little things that, like, I'm trying to get better at. Because I think, like, the idea of, like, yes, connection's important. Yes, developing deep relationships is important. I have an easier time doing it with my fiance because we communicate every day and I live with her, right? So, once again, I think, like, so close together, and this is my life partner. But I don't want that to be different. I still want to spend time with my parents. I still want to spend time Like, I feel like I could be better with my brothers. I feel like I can still be better with my friends a little bit, and like their kids and their nieces and nephews. And that's something that like I'm trying to do with my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, is like spend more time with the nephew and nieces. And the reason why I say this and I kind of share my side of this story is don't overestimate the power of really deep relationships, right? But understand that deep relationships don't just get created on their own. Like, this is something that you have to intentionally work for every single day. The same effort that you put into your job, the same effort maybe that you put into your training, the same effort that you maybe put into your relationship at home with your significant other, right? Like, or maybe the areas that you feel like you have good areas of focus and attention. You know, one thing that I've always said for me as far as pursuit of balance goes is I have clients. Like, I have a client that I train. I love him. And his company's valued in the billions with a B, right? Like, just like, stupid rich. And I remember he said to me, he's like, this idea of success is not a monetary thing, right? And I was like, oh, I say this all the time, right? Like, imagine being a billionaire, but having man boobs and terrible relationship and just depressed, right? Like, or imagine being the exact opposite. Imagine having a 6-pack and 5% body fat, but can't afford to pay rent, right? Or whatever it is, right? I just use those as kind of two counterintuitive like examples. But like, as far as what success looks like for us, success should be this balance between all these things where it's an element of that I can make a lot of money with my work and be a successful job. I can be successful with my physical health, right? Where I can be lean, I can be strong, I can be mobile. I can be successful with my mental health. I can have good resilience. I can have good relationships. I can have good emotional control, emotional health. I can have a good sexual life. I can have like all these elements, right? And I can just keep ranting on. But one of the most important things to really kind of keep those things cohesive is we got to remember that we're social beings, right? And being a social being requires you being social. And my biggest problem with the technology era, right? And this is like this is something that I've kind of grown a little sensitive to sometimes, but I don't ever input my 2 cents into other people's relationships or parenting style. But I think about that, and Nikki and I talk about this every once in a while. Is like, will I have the kids on iPads as a distraction? I understand it because it's almost like it's like a bib, or not, what's a bib? The pacifier in a sense, where it's just like, okay, can get the baby to shut up and give you a little bit of break, right? I mean, like, I can see the stress on people around me that have kids, as far as the lack of sleep or being irritable or the kids fucking bitching and crying about things. So I understand why people use the iPad, but I think the importance of having the social relationships comes from being social, right? Like, you need to be social like a human. And if you put us in a very natural perspective of life, like, we are social beings and we should be socializing as much as possible. So the element of connection for family or friends or work needs to be something that I think we need to put as a bigger priority in our lives, because when we can focus on creating deep connections and we can focus on nurturing these connections and expressing our love and being transparent about these things, you live a life with some comforts knowing that you've developed exactly what's required to live a long, healthy life, right? So I don't think I want to keep ranting because I think that was kind of a good little rant on things. But really, like, as far as everything goes in health, connection and purpose has always been kind of a thing that I love to talk about, right? So don't overestimate the importance of connections. Don't take time for granted, because your friends, your family, your significant other, no one's going to be here forever, unfortunately, right? Unless you believe in the afterlife, right? But like, as far as this life, so take every opportunity you can to spend time with these people, to be present with the moment, to not have bad blood, and to express love and to express peace, and like that be the frequency that you create for the people around you. Because I promise, in return, it makes you feel good knowing that you have good people around you that will protect you and have your back for everything that you do. The more bridges that you burn, the more selfish you become, the more depressed you will become. That's it, right? All right, guys. Well, as always, I hope you got some good little nuggets. Share this with people that want to hear it, that you think can benefit from it. That's episode 115 of Pursuit of Balance. I will see you guys in maybe a week, but I am gone next weekend, so it might be 2 weeks. Take care. See ya.